AEW is not even over yet. The main event is going to be starting shortly between MJF and Speedball, Mike Bailey. But Chris Jericho just made a surprise return to kick off Dynamite. Oh my God. After being gone for nearly a year, I actually had to look this up. The last time that he um, was in AEW was on April the 6th. So in just a couple of days, it would hit exactly a year. But today's April 1st, so it's just nearly a year when he wrestled at Dynasty against Bandito, where he lost the ROH World Championship. And I got to say, this was a shocker for a couple of different reasons. For one thing, they were kind of teasing the idea for months, and even Jericho was kind of hinting at it that he was going to leave AEW and return to WWE. There was these posts that he was coming out where he was looking like he had gotten in better shape. Um, Even a lot of people thought he was going to show up on the premiere of the 1 year anniversary of Raw when it was on Netflix on the 5th this year, January the 5th. A lot of people thought he was going to show up then. They even thought he was going to show up at the Rumble when they was in Saudi Arabia, but neither of those things took place. And then there was a report that he was never actually taken off of the AEW roster page, that his contract had been frozen or something like that, that he still has some time left on it. So, really, after he didn't show up at the Rumble, that, it was kind of, and then you had some people when Danhausen showed up at the Elimination Chamber, they were thinking they were a little bit upset. Some people thought it was because of Jericho not being the person to come out of the box. And then another thing came out that some believed that it was just because they were just upset at the fact that he just did, came out and then disappeared or whatever. But whatever the case was, I did not see any reports about this, so this was definitely a shock to me. If there were any reports that Jericho was going to come out, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not see no reports. It's hard to keep surprises these days with returns or returns or debuts. It's rare that you get surprises like this just come out of nowhere. And it was good, and it made sense. They are in Winnipeg tonight, Winnipeg, Toya, Canada, his hometown. So it makes sense that he would come back in his hometown. A couple of hometown guys out tonight. Kenny Omega won the opener of the contract. After that, with MJF, he was in the 6-man tag against against the Command on the winning side with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. Beating the Command, Ricochet, and the other two guys. And then so you had that, and you had the excellent match with Pac and Offspray that just took place not that long ago. And then the women's match you just saw with the Brawling Birds and winning lost Shamiya Sarakawa, who actually defeated the Triangles of Madness of the with Tekla and Julia and Sky Blue, one of their first losses as a trio in a while. Um, but but yeah, man, I just wanted to quickly come on here because the main event is on right now, and I'm gonna take a look at the main event. But Chris Jericho coming back was a shocker that night. I did not see that coming. I really have to say they shocked me on that one because all these different reports. There was a firm belief, that Jericho, and he even kind of teased it himself, that he was going to come back to WWE. And it was funny because, at one point it was just like, what if it turns out that Jericho just shows back up in AEW? And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. It took a while, but that's exactly what happened. When you think about it, he was getting booed, prior to him leaving and taking time off. And, now he's getting cheered again, probably perhaps mainly because it was in his hometown. But you think Jericho was been gone for so long because before he left, people were chanting towards him to please retire. He was doing the whole learning tree stuff. And then he left, and that gimmick was legitimately like him kind of using it as like a setback of the fans, like talking about him taking up TV, too much TV time, and all of that. He actually used that with the whole learner tree stuff, and you know, after that, he just left, and I guess now he's a babyface again. But it'd be interesting to see how the rest of the crowd reacts when he goes back to the U.S. and other states. But I think they'll probably react very similar, just because of the fact he's been gone for so long. Um, and I think the whole thing was it was just burnout, towards Jericho. Jericho, take nothing away from Jericho, even though he, may have gotten sluggish the last past year, whatever the case was. Um, he's definitely um, one of the legends, in the business. He's been in the game for some time. WCW, ECW, WWF, WWE. He's done it. He's been in almost every promotion except for well, all the major ones except for like TNA. And you know, um, it's definitely a big deal, for him to show up in this manner. Um, However you feel about him, and it was a complete shock. I did not see it coming. Um, and it'll be interesting to see where he kind of goes from here. I mean, the fact that he showed up tonight and simply just said, Winnipeg, I'm home, um, kept it short and sweet. It's very interesting. Um, but, man, so Jericho is back. Does this mean that he's not going to come back to WWE? Who knows? Maybe he just came back for a short extension with AEW, or maybe he came back to, still close out his career with AEW. I mean, who really knows? Only Jericho really knows. Tony Khan, when they were asking the questions about Jericho, he kind of didn't really give a definitive answer other than just him being happy that Jericho's a part of his, company and things like that. So there you go with that. But man, shocker tonight, because Tony Giovanni got in the ring, the lights and the pyro kept going off, and he was like, "Sorry about that," and then it did it again, and he was trying to figure out what was going on. And next thing you know, Jericho just played. He's back to his old music as far as AEW is concerned with Judas. So he kind of knew with him coming up with that music that, because it's hard to boo him with that type of music. That's why when he turned back heel, with the learning tree stuff, he had a different song. Like he was even using Judas during the whole time with the Inner Circle, and even when the Jericho Appreciation Society, he had that group going, he was still using that same theme song up into the learning trees when he started to use a different song. But yeah, really complete shocker tonight. This main event with Mike Bailey and MJF looks pretty good. But yeah, just wanted to go and say that real quickly. Jericho is back. Did not see it coming. Y2J is back in AEW. And man, just a complete shock. I did not see it coming. So I'm sure the WWE fans aren't happy, but hey, I watch both companies, but hey, he's back in AEW. And that's just the decision he made, or whatever the case was with that whole situation. So I'm interested to see where he goes from here. So that's pretty much it, guys. So here's the flex.